Could be. Yeah, it is. Right, shall I crack on then? Ready to go? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Friday talk, the St Barbe Friday talk. I am taking over from Prue, but very temporarily, I can promise you. So I will be doing the parish notices. The first thing that we really have to talk about is Lymington Afloat. Very successful exhibition. People are really enjoying it. They haven't found any mistakes yet, which I personally am very grateful for. And over last weekend, which was our festival weekend, we had more than 1,500 visitors just into the museum for the exhibition, which was fantastic. But also there was the festival weekend, which was particularly successful, with more than 1,000 people visiting boats on the Town and Harbour Masters Quay, people out having a go on ribs and paddle boards, and even a dog race at the Seawater Baths, which I'm pleased I didn't see. And there was a spectacular rescue by the RNLI, but a bit more of that later. We haven't collated all the facts and figures yet. We have a meeting to discuss that in a week or two. But the Lymington Times thinks that we had more than 1,500 more visitors into the town over that festival weekend than would normally be in the town at that time. So I think that is brilliant, and it proves that culture and community and businesses can really work together to make a huge success of any endeavour, and it makes good things happen, so I'm really pleased about that. We can't thank everyone enough, those who sponsored, who volunteered, who supported and attended the event, and we really couldn't have done it without quite a lot of people that are sitting in this room, so thank you very much, everybody. A few other notices. We've received a sort of slightly bittersweet award, I would say, which is bestowed by Visit England, and we are the hidden gem in the UK this year. So I'm going to go and collect this award in a couple of weeks, but I would like to say I don't want to be a hidden gem. I want to be a very much out there, in-your-face gem. So please tell all of your friends about the museum. It's really, really important. Our award-winning HAF programme, Hampshire Activities and Food, has been funded again for Christmas, which will be brilliant. And the Inspire weekend last month was enormous fun. We had more than 3,000 people coming in, and these are people who wouldn't normally visit the museum, I would say, so it's brilliant. A quick plug for next month's talk on the 1st of November. Rob and Tom Humphreys will be talking about innovation in yacht design, past and present, so look forward to that. So now this bit, I'm pleased I checked. So now the bit you've all been waiting for. This is a talk by Dave Monks, Water Safety Officer for the RNLI for Central Solent. I got that right? Which isn't what it says on your programme, but therefore it's going to be much more interesting. And he's going to tell us about the RNLI and 200 years of saving lives at sea. So please welcome him.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. And could I start with an apology? If I descend into a coughing fit, it's nothing to do with COVID or anything like that. I'm just getting to the end of a heavy head cold. But, my colleague Charlie is in the audience here. I rounded him up just in case I went down with laryngitis. But you're okay, Charlie, you got excused. So very briefly, just to explain where I fit and my team fits, we're the water safety team, as you can see. In essence, we're the adult education arm of the RNLI. So we spend our time talking to groups, talking to clubs, talking to members of the public about how to stay safe on and around the water. So that's our particular piece of what the RNLI is trying to do. However, my talk tonight is about the whole of the RNLI, and as it's entitled, A Short History of the RNLI, because we've got 200 years to cover, and I haven't got 200 years to do it in. So I'm going to kick off now with asking you to all come with me on a journey through back into the 18th century. Here in the realm of King George III, despite all the extravagant lifestyle, especially associated with his son's years as Prince Regent, during mad King George's reign, and hence our term Regency to describe the times of Beau Brummel, etc., John Nash and the Brighton Pavilion, life at sea was particularly hard and dangerous. This is the era of the Napoleonic Wars, of Trafalgar, of slave ships and sugar and cotton trades. And whilst the life of the average seaman was tough, it was actually no different for the majority of those living in Britain at this time. Hard and unremitting toil with little money or food for the masses while the rich got richer. Have heard that again lately, somehow. It's against this background that the morality of wrecking on coasts should be judged. There are many stories of ships being lured into danger in order for those living on the coastal villages to plunder their cargoes, and of false lights to confuse ships' masters to sail their vessels into rocks, etc. However, the vast majority of these stories are just that, stories. And in practice, there were many more attempts by coastal villagers to come to the aid of those unfortunates who found themselves being driven onto the rocks by storms, etc., as some of these pictures will attest. You will see from these there were many attempts to save lives through the use of throwing lines to drag people ashore, from launching boats to assist passengers and crew safely off ships. And I'm certain that there were many individual examples of real heroism which have gone unrecorded. It could be argued that the change started with a London coach builder, Lionel Lukin, and his invention in 1785 of the world's first unemergible boat. This was a Norwegian yawl. It's a type of sailing boat which Lukin had adopted and adapted by incorporating pockets of air in watertight bulkheads, and that's what this diagram is attempting to show you. Today we would call them buoyancy chambers. They have buoyant gunwales, the top sides of the boat, and they replaced some of the non-load-bearing timbers with cork to create even more buoyancy. He was granted a patent for his invention on the 2nd of November 1785, and the following year was commissioned by the Archdeacon of Northumberland, Dr. John Sharp, to convert a Northumberland coble, a sturdy northeastern fishing boat, using his ideas and stationing the converted craft at Bamburgh Castle. This became known as the world's first lifeboat, and therefore Bamburgh Castle became the world's first lifeboat station. The title of father of the lifeboat, however, would probably rightly have been awarded to this gentleman. It's a boat builder 15 years his junior, Henry Greathead. Greathead comes into the picture as a result of a tragedy in 1789 with the sinking of the ship Adventure in the mouth of the River Tyne during a violent storm. Conditions were so bad that the sea was too rough for the local seamen to be able to launch their boats, and they had to look on helplessly as the crew of the Adventure drowned. This led the South Shields Law House Committee to launch a competition to find an inventor to design and build a lifeboat. The prize of 2 guineas, in today's terms it's around £1,500, was set and submissions sought. Among the entrants were William Woodhave, the parish clerk of South Shields, and a local boat builder, Henry Greathead. Woodhave's designs compromising copper and cork was for a self-righting boat. An example of his design can be seen in South Shields. It's the picture you can see on the right here, where the Tyne lifeboat is preserved. Greathead's more traditional approach was for an all-wooden boat, but which did not self-right. The committee decided to produce a final design which was a combination of both ideas and offered half of the reward to each. Woodhave took offence and rejected the offer. Greathead accepted and went on to build the world's first purpose-built lifeboat. The aptly named Original, measuring 9 metres long, roughly 30 feet, and 3 metres wide. She could carry 20 people and was rowed by a crew of 12. Henry went on to build a total of 31 of these original type lifeboats over the next 20 years, which were stationed around the coast, including the oldest, sorry, I'll go back on that, the oldest surviving lifeboat, the Zetland, built in 1802 and stationed at Redcar, where during her service she saved over 500 lives and is kept in the Zetland Lifeboat Museum at Redcar. So you could see it if you go. Whilst these individual moves to save lives were going on, public sentiment was also moving in a much more considerate direction. The latter years of George's reign and the turn of the century saw the abolition of the slave trade, the growth of the trade union movement, the formation of the Royal Humane Society, the growth of philanthropy, and many other influences which started the drive to save lives from shipwreck. Among these philanthropists was someone you may never have heard of, Sir William Hillary. Sir William first came to public attention as the equerry to Prince Augustus Frederick, a younger brother of King George IV and later Duke of Sussex, a forerunner of Prince Harry, in other words. And through his travels with the Prince in Europe, and more particularly to Malta, to witness the election of one of the last Grand Masters of the Knights of John of Malta, the extravagantly named Ferdinand von Hempesch zu Bolheim, what a mouthful that is, who went on to have the unfortunate record of being the Grand Master who, after 250 years, lost the Knights their Maltese base when Napoleon's navy arrived and invaded Malta in 1798. Having returned from his service abroad, Hillary then settled in his home in the Isle of Man, where over a number of years he was instrumental in raising crews to man rescue boats to go out and rescue lives from ships wrecked in Douglas Bay, and was clearly affected, much affected, by one particular incident, which was the wrecking of HMS Racehorse in 1822, where 6 of the ship's crew drowned, but also 3 of the local rescuers were drowned as well. He was obviously influenced not only by the tragic loss of life close to his home, but also the situation of the families of the rescuers who were either drowned or injured and therefore unable to work. Remember, this is long before the days of social security, so the lack of income badly affected wives and children of these volunteers. As a result, he made a number of personal charitable donations, and he organised others to do the same, realising that there was no coordinated response to such disasters. He set out to do something about this, and in 1823 he prepared and distributed a pamphlet with a really snappy title, which I won't attempt to read for you, but you can see on the screen. This outlined the plan for a lifeboat service manned by trained crews for all of the UK and Ireland. His initial idea was to launch an appeal to the nation, and he approached the Royal Navy, members of the government and prominent citizens in an attempt to gain support for his proposal, but found there was little support forthcoming. Even at this stage, another significant figure in the story, Captain George Manby. He was not a naval captain, but a captain in the Cambridgeshire militia. It was George Manby who 15 years earlier had witnessed HMS Snipe run aground off Great Yarmouth in a strong winter gale, which resulted in 214 people drowning, even though they were within reach of the shore. A prolific inventor, he then started to experiment with a means to get a line from the shore to the vessel, and through this enable people to be rescued. And this resulted in the development of the Manby mortar, an early version of what some of you may be familiar with now we would call the breeches buoy. It's a rocket that fires a line attached to it and gets it onto the ship. The government bought into this idea, and his invention was officially adopted in 1814, and within 2 years a series of Manby mortar stations, nearly 60 in all, were established around the coast. Manby's invention was a success in that a relatively inexpensive piece of equipment could be transported to cliffs or beaches close to a casualty figure, a vessel, and by firing the mortar over the ship with a light line attached, this enabled the crew to haul aboard a heavier line through which could be used to help passengers and crew get ashore. Its one drawback, however, was that it had to be within range of the vessel in order to have any effect. Manby also had another claim to fame, which he was the inventor of the fire extinguisher in 1818. It was the first portable pressurised fire extinguisher and the forerunner of the modern-day equivalent you can see here. The catalyst which brought Hillary and Manby together was a second attempt by Hillary to gain support in 1824, this time succeeding in being backed by two influential politicians of their era, Sir Robert Thomas Wilson and George Hibbert, respectively the Liberal MP for Southwark and a distinguished soldier who eventually rose to the rank of general, and the latter the Tory MP for Seaford and an eminent, if controversial, merchant who campaigned for the slave trade in competition with William Wilberforce. This may have been driven by his extensive interests in the sugar trade from Jamaica. He was chairman of the Society of West India Merchants, after all. Despite some personal differences, the three men became a formidable force and the campaign rapidly gathered momentum. An interim committee was appointed while plans were made for a public meeting. More and more benefactors came on board, inspired by the committee's rigorous face-to-face lobbying. The three agreed that a public meeting would be called at the next step, and on the 4th of February 1824, this was held at the London Tavern on Bishopsgate, a favourite haunt of noblemen and gentlemen, in which a number of other successful charities had been launched. However, on the day, only 15 people turned up, but they did include several influential faces, and following the outlining by Hillary of his proposal, it was agreed that another meeting should be held, but that before then they would need to attract more sponsors. Illustrious names were crucial to the plan to bring it to fruition, and here Wilson's connections with the establishment were key, as he set out to win a royal patron and to convince the Prime Minister of the day, Robert Jenkinson, the second Earl of Liverpool, to be president of this new society. King George IV agreed to become patron of the fledgling institution, and as a result, the Dukes of York, Clarence, Sussex, Cambridge and Prince Leopold all joined in as vice patrons. Thus, armed with a really significant royal patronage and with the Prime Minister as president, the three founders looked forward to the second meeting with great anticipation. The meeting was again held in the London Tavern, and this time around 30 eminent gentlemen of London society subscribed their names to the fledgling national institution at that inaugural public meeting held on the 4th of March 1824, which is considered to be the birth of the RNLI. Vice President and Archbishop Canterbury, Dr. Charles Manners Sutton, presided over the meeting, and among the aristocrats, clerics, politicians, naval officers, brokers, bankers, merchants and philanthropists were anti-slavery campaigner William Wilberforce and sea safety guru Captain George Manby. The crowd passed 12 resolutions, including that an institution be formed to be supported by donations and annual subscriptions, that such immediate assistance be afforded to persons rescued as their necessities may require, that the subjects of all nations be equally objects of the institution, as well as in war as in peace, and that medallions or pecuniary awards be given to those who rescue lives. Little did they know that these 12 resolutions would still stand as part of the RNLI's charter 200 years later. A further 9 resolutions, mainly recognising the efforts of the key players, were also met with eager approval. With the King approving the addition of the word royal to the name, the institution became the Royal National Institute for the Preservation of Life and Property for Shipwreck. That's a long one. Or more commonly known as the Shipwreck Institution. And this was in fact the name under which the life-saving operations ran for the next 30 years, before on the 5th of October 1854, the name was formally changed to the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. Or in other words, tomorrow is our true 170th birthday. The RNLI is better known by its initials. However, having achieved the ambition of founding the organisation, things didn't go entirely well as Hillary wished. Feeling his place as the hero of the shipwrecked mariner was being usurped, Manby had grown jealous of Hillary's role in the new organisation. When a vote of thanks to Hillary was proposed, a row broke out, which ended with the Archbishop intervening to ensure that the thanks extended to both. Within weeks of raising their subscription and inviting applications for awards, the institution received a considerable number of requests for awards, leading to the first award of the Royal National Institute's Gold Medal for Gallantry. It was awarded to Captain Charles Fremantle, Royal Navy, who, in addition to being the son of Admiral Sir Thomas Fremantle, one of Nelson's captains at the Battle of Trafalgar, was also a member of the Lymington Coast Guard. We have a local connection. And he was president of the grounding of the Swedish brig Carl Jean at Whitepit near Christchurch in Dorset. Realising no boat was available, Fremantle had stripped off and swum to the ship carrying a line attached, which eventually led to the crew being saved. Money had also started to be donated, and within a year of formation, nearly £10,000 had been raised. This is equivalent to nearly £10 million today. And it was enough to pay for 10 lifeboat stations to be established in places around the UK, not forgetting Sir William's home in Douglas, Isle of Man. Formal recognition of his role in founding the organisation came for Hillary in 1825 at the first AGM, with the presentation of a gold medallion to him. Within months of this award, Hillary was in action again, this time saving the 60 passengers aboard the paddle steamer City of Glasgow, which had run aground on a reef in Douglas Bay, and felt sure that another gold medal was his due. He was disappointed, therefore, with the institution's response, which was a letter of thanks. This led to much rancorous correspondence between Hillary and the committee considering awards, but to no avail. He continued to be involved with the institution for the remainder of his life, dying at the age of 78 in 1847 at his home on the Isle of Man, and having witnessed in the intervening years the tremendous effect upon the institution and on its funds of one woman, Grace Darling. Grace Darling was the seventh child of 9, born to William and Thomasin Darling, and was born on the 24th of November 1815 in her grandfather's cottage in Bamborough, Northumberland. William was a lighthouse keeper and was responsible for the lights around the Farne Islands, notably the Long Stone Light Rock House, in which Grace grew up. In the early years of the 7th of September 1838, the steamship, the SS Forfarshire, with 60 passengers and crew, struck the Big Harcar Rock, a mile from the lighthouse. Within minutes, the ship struck again, this time breaking in two, with the stern half being swept away by the gale and sinking with 48 people. Grace, who was only 22 at the time, had seen the wreck from her bedroom window, and with the aid of a telescope, made out there were survivors clinging to the rock. Despite the storm, Grace and her father decided to row out and rescue the survivors. This involved rowing almost a mile in treacherous seas, and as they approached the Big Harcar, they realised they would have to make 2 trips to get everyone to safety. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the rescue was complete, and 9 survivors had been rescued. 9 others had managed to get into a lifeboat and were eventually rescued by a sloop later that night. The effect, however, was significant because the national newspapers reported her story, and Grace became known as a heroine and won the hearts of the nation. She received several awards, including a gold medal from the Royal Humane Society and a silver medal for gallantry from the Shipwreck Institution. Admirers sent letters, gifts and money. Queen Victoria herself sent £50. Grace became immortalised in plays, songs, poems and memorabilia, and indeed there are many today who, when asked to name anyone associated with saving lives at sea, would choose Grace Darling before they'd choose Sir William Hillary. Tragically, Grace's life was a short one, as she developed tuberculosis at the age of 29 and died in her father's arms on the 20th of October 1842. She is remembered to this day at the Grace Darling Museum in Bamborough, which is dedicated to her story. And again, you can go and visit this. With the passing of Hillary and the change of name in 1854, it's now time to fast forward through the significant events leading to the modern RNLI. In the same year as the name change, an RNLI inspector, Captain Charles Ward, broke new ground in safety for the lifeboat crews with the invention of the cork life jacket. See, we'll all be wearing those on our yachts today. This followed a series of experiments looking for the best combination of buoyancy, weight, durability, water resistance and flexibility. Remember, these lifeboatmen were still rowing their boats out to sea at this time. Among the suggestions tried and discarded were such unusual combinations as a canvas jacket filled with air, light enough but punctured easily. A filling made from horsehair and rushes, neither waterproof or durable. And baobab and balsa woods, barks which are light and buoyant but hard to obtain and expensive to purchase. Contrast the cork life jacket with the highly engineered inflatable life jacket worn by the RNLI today. There it is. 1884 saw the design of the RNLI's flag. This was designed by Leonora Preston, the sister of Robert Preston, who 2 years prior had been rescued by the Ramsgate lifeboat from a vessel stranded on the Goodwin Sands. She used the George's Cross as the basis, adding a dark blue border to the edge of the cross and the 4 initials of the RNLI in each of the cantons, finally adding the Royal Crown to signify the royal patronage and a fouled anchor to signify dedication to the seas. It took a further 24 years for it to be adopted. The RNLI does work fairly slowly, I'm afraid. But from 1908, the flag has proudly flown from all RNLI premises and is on all of our lifeboats. The crown having been updated twice now, first in 1953 with the accession of Her Majesty the Queen, and then again recently with the accession, obviously, of the King. 1890 saw the first move towards motorised lifeboats with the building of 3 hydraulic steam-driven lifeboats, and although these were served for over 40 years and saved 570 lives between them, they were eventually dropped in favour of motor lifeboats driven by petrol and then later diesel. The following year saw another innovation, but this time rather than on the coast, and one which has gone on to touch the consciousness of hundreds of thousands of people in the country, if not millions. The year is 1891, and it saw a major change in fundraising organised in Manchester, with a local wealthy industrialist, Sir Charles Macara, and his wife, Lady Marian, got a committee together, and rather than just ask for donations from wealthy donors, they decided to ask the man in the street for donations through the creation of the world's first charity street collection. So it's all down to these two that we now get accosted by the chuggers. But Lifeboat Day, as it became known, was incredibly successful, and many towns subsequently picked up the idea, which resulted in the RNLI becoming known and supported well inland from its traditional coastal connections. This was also the start of the RNLI's branch system, with Lady Marian establishing ladies' lifeboat guilds, a number of which still remain to this day. 1914-1918 unfortunately brings us into a more turbulent time. During the Great War, the RNLI launched nearly 1,800 times, and they saved over 5,000 lives, including one of the most famous rescues of this war, the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915. She was torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine in contentious circumstances which are still argued about today. But with nearly 2,000 souls aboard, it was a race against time to get to her 11 miles off the coast of Southern Ireland. 2 RNLI lifeboats, one from Queenstown, now known as Cove, and one from Cork McSherry, were part of a flotilla of craft which were sent out to try to rescue survivors. The Cork McSherry boat needed to be rowed by its 14-man crew for a total of 3.5 hours to reach the scene. Unfortunately, they were too late to save anyone, so set about recovering bodies to bring home to loved ones. In total, 761 lives were saved, but 1,191 perished in this one incident. 1922 saw the formation of the Irish Free State, later the Republic of Ireland. And despite the withdrawal from Ireland of such government-controlled bodies as the Coast Guard, etc., the RNLI, as an independent and voluntarily funded organisation, opted to stay. And to this day, there are 36 RNLI stations, Royal National Lifeboat Institution stations, around the coast of the Republic of Ireland. They love us just as much, however. If we move forward, we get into 1939 to 1945 and World War II. Despite the highly dangerous conditions, RNLI crews saved nearly 6,500 lives during the course of the war, including many airmen, both Allies and Axis, who ditched in the sea. In addition to their life-saving duties, the RNLI crews also contributed to the war effort by towing vessels loaded with explosives and top-secret information, navigating minefields, ferrying food to remote villages, bringing doctors to the injured, bringing priests to the dying. But again, one particular rescue stands out, and that is the participation of RNLI lifeboats, especially those from Margate and Ramsgate, in Operation Dynamo, the rescue of the British Expeditionary Force and the Allies from the beach at Dunkirk in 1940. Although a total of 19 RNLI lifeboats were engaged in this dramatic event, including one from Poole, not too far from us, 17 of these were crewed by Navy personnel, and only 2, those from Margate and Ramsgate, were crewed by their usual RNLI volunteers. Ramsgate's lifeboat, Prudential, under its coxswain in the middle of that group of 3, Howard Knight, towed 8 small Thames workboats, known as wherries, across to be used to ferry troops off the beaches to the lifeboat, and when rowing back and to became too difficult, floated the wherries ashore on the end of long lines to enable them to be hauled back aboard before floating them back again. In this way, the crew managed to get around 1,000 men off the beach before the last of the wherries was too damaged to continue and they had to go back to Ramsgate. Margate's lifeboat, the Lord Southborough, was towed across to, was towed across to conserve fuel. And under the leadership of coxswain Edward Parker, the crew, which included his 2 sons, James and Edward, focused on ferrying soldiers from the shore to the larger vessels anchored in deeper water, and they alone were responsible for rescuing 600 men in the process. Both crews received the RNLI's thanks on vellum for their Dunkirk spirit, and both coxswains were awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for their gallantry and determination, which in itself is unusual because the DSM is a Royal Navy medal, not typically awarded to civilians, like Parker and Knight. Another legendary coxswain of the RNLI, and for whom there is a museum established at Cromer Lifeboat Station, where he served, was Henry Blogg, the most decorated volunteer in RNLI history, with 3 gold medals, 4 silver medals to his name, and his 53 years of service. Together with his Cromer crews, he was responsible for saving 873 lives. Of these, 88 were saved in a single service on the Haysborough Sands in 1941. Henry Blogg retired in 1947, aged 71, before passing away in 1954 at the age of 78. We then move on to a completely different era. 1963 saw the introduction of a completely different type of lifeboat. The inshore lifeboat, or ILB, developed from the original Zodiac inflatable boats, and now known as a D-class boat, in service today in many lifeboat stations, to enable close inshore work and casualty retrieval. Of the lifeboats in service today, around the coast of the British Isles, there are nearly 100 of these D-class boats still in use. In a break with a 100-year tradition, 1969 saw the qualification of the first female helm, when 18-year-old Elizabeth Hostfed became the helm of the RNLI Atlantic College Lifeboat Station's inshore lifeboat. In 2005, helm Aileen Jones became the first female crew member to win an RNLI Gallantry Medal in 2005, and in 2006, lifeguard Sophie Grant Cookson was awarded the Bronze Medal of Gallantry, becoming the first female lifeguard to receive an award. To date, 23 women have been awarded medals for their bravery by the RNLI, and the RNLI has now over 300 female crew members, with the majority of lifeboat stations having at least one female crew member, and over 20% of the RNLI lifeguards are female. Here in Lymington, we have a number of female members of the operational team. 1972 saw the development of the workhorse of the RNLI, the B-class or Atlantic rib, originally called the Atlantic 75 and subsequently updated the Atlantic 85. They stretched it a bit, made it bigger. It's a much more powerful boat. This type of lifeboat was first developed at Atlantic College in South Wales and initially built for the RNLI by the students of the college. Development and construction has now been passed to the RNLI's Inshore Lifeboat Centre, which is in East Cowes. You can visit this, get tours around it. It's an interesting place to go and look around. There are now over 100 of these B-class boats in the RNLI's fleets. Having created a national network of lifeboat stations and equipped with them with increasingly sophisticated and therefore expensive equipment, it became evident to the RNLI some 25 years ago that the maritime scene was changing rapidly, and we bring even further demands upon the limited resources of the RNLI. And this led to the appointment of Michael Vlasto as the RNLI's first sea safety officer. My great-great-granddad, in other words, because he was the first guy in the RNLI that focused not on being on a boat, but on educating members of the public on how to stay safe. He oversaw the development and launch in 1995 of the Safety at Sea initiative and of the RNLI's preventative work to try to reduce the demand for rescue. The turn of the millennium also saw a new development within the RNLI, this time originating from outside the UK, and as a result of the RNLI's involvement with the disastrous floods in February and March 2000 in Mozambique, a team of 8 RNLI volunteers, equipped with 6 D-class inflatable lifeboats, joined the effort to provide humanitarian aid to 10,000 people during the disaster. Drawing upon their experience, the RNLI created a fully trained and specially equipped flood rescue team, providing 24/7 search and rescue in flooded areas across the UK, Ireland and beyond. Members of this specialised flood rescue team were awarded the Bronze Medal for gallantry following the rescue of a lady under very difficult circumstances in Umberley and Devon in 2012. 2001 saw another new development, with the first RNLI lifeguards deployed onto 25 popular beaches in southwest England, and this has now grown to over 1,500 lifeguards manning 250 beaches in the UK and Channel Islands in the summer, and the saving of hundreds of lives through both their direct intervention and also their preventative actions. Since 2002, some of the RNLI's volunteer crews have had to learn how to fly. Not very high, however, because this was the year in which hovercraft were introduced to the RNLI's fleet. And if any of you have been to Morecambe Bay when they've been active, you will have seen what a fantastic solution it is. Morecambe Bay, for those of you who may know it, is an incredibly flat, long beach. And this is the ideal vehicle to try and get to people in trouble. 2004 saw the official opening by Her Majesty the Queen of the RNLI College, or as it is now known, the Lifeboat College. Initially designed for the training of lifeboat crews with classrooms, lifeboats, live engine workshops, bridge simulators and sea survival pool, this has become a central home for the RNLI community. In addition to that, it's a great place to stay. With hotel-level accommodation and services, when not in use by crews under training, the public are able to stay and enjoy the superb facilities, including a harbour view from every room, a bar, full-service restaurant on site, as well as conducted tours of the college. There's always plenty of buzz about the place. The latest developments have been the decision to build a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility to enable the RNLI to take in-house the development and build of the very latest Shannon-class 25-knot lifeboats, as well as maintaining the existing all-weather lifeboat fleet. and in so doing make considerable annual savings running into millions of pounds. Opened in 2015, the All-Weather Lifeboat Centre has 2 vast boat halls, a covered courtyard area and a total workshop floor area of 5,000 square metres. It is being used to build our current and future generations of all-weather lifeboats and has the hidden benefit of bringing and retaining vital skills within the organisation to enable it to cope with changes in technology and demand. Also capable of being toured as part of a college tour, they're next door to one another in Poole, the ARC makes a fascinating introduction to the complexities of building a £2 million lifeboat, which is how much each Shannon class costs us. And with any luck and my fingers crossed, I'm just going to run you a short video which I hope will summarise what we're doing. So, as it says, on behalf of our lifeboat crews, lifeguards, flood response, coastal safety teams, water safety teams, all of our volunteers, of which there are nearly 40,000 involved in the RNLI, and those that have been saved by them, thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions? somebody out there.
Gentleman
yes,
here.
Bill.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
A very interesting presentation. We see every day and we hear about these hapless people who are taking small boats from France across the Channel, being exploited mercilessly. And yet, there sometimes is some, you might say, doubt expressed about whether those boats getting in trouble should be rescued. What is the official RNLI policy on dealing with a situation where a rubber boat with these individuals crosses into British water and gets into trouble?
We have a very, very straightforward and clear policy on this, which is we serve and save lives at sea. We don't care where they're from, we don't care who they are, we don't care how they actually manage to get into trouble. If somebody requires to be saved, we will go and save them.
Thank you. I'm very pleased with that answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. It's a very simple thing. I'm just always intrigued about this Class B and Class D. What does it mean and why are they called? What happened to A and C? And
I wonder that myself, I have to tell you, because nobody seems to know the answers to those. I'll tell you what's even worse is the big boats, they have a little inflatable that sits on the back of that. It's called a Y boat. Hang on a minute, what happened to all the rest of the letters of the alphabet? I really can't answer you, I'm afraid. Somewhere, some bureaucrat in the team decided we'll call it one of those, shall we? Yeah. I think there's a gentleman over here. Yep.
Many of us over the years have put the odd change in our from a shop or wherever into the little lifeboat on the counter.
Yep.
Now we're moving more and more into a cashless society. What plans do the RNLI have to find another source of income? Because I bought a cup of coffee today at a local cafe, £3 on my credit card. Nobody now is carrying cash in the same way they used to do.
Well, again, if I can give you the answer that the RNLI is not necessarily the first to innovate with these things, but we are catching up. So most of our fundraising teams now have card readers. We now have collecting buckets that have card readers on the top as well, so people can both put cash into the bucket, but also, if they wish, tap their cards. They're still held in relatively short numbers, so it's a bit of a bone of contention here in Lymington that we've only got 2 of them, one for the fundraising team and one for the shop. However, when the water safety team go out and do events, we are forever being asked by people, have you got a card machine? And so we're struggling to actually convince pool headquarters that actually these are really valuable and low-cost means of being able to get those funds in. So you're right, the world is moving to a cashless society. There are, however, still lots of people who put crisply folded up notes, including one gentleman who at a show that Charlie and I were at not too long ago, who folded up 2 £50 notes and stuffed them in the bucket, which is fantastic. I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions? Oh.
It's about the immigrants coming across the channel. This must be putting an extra strain on the resources of the local lifeboats in the channel. Quite a few of those vessels are not sinking, and there are no lives in danger, and yet these chaps have got to go out and bring them back to the UK shore. Is that a big problem?
Well, let me just deal with a couple of things. First of all, the lifeboats don't go out unless they're asked. So who asks for the lifeboats? Well, it's actually the Coast Guard. Her Majesty's Coast Guard are the authority under which lifeboats get tasked. So you will never find an RNLI lifeboat out rescuing anybody without there having been either a Coast Guard call to say we need you to launch, or the local station has actually seen this happen and decided to act immediately. So the question of Dover and Ramsgate is a very complicated one. Thankfully, we have some really, really powerful, big capacity lifeboats that we positioned there long before this process came about. So the all-weather lifeboats, similar to the one in Yarmouth, have an amazing capacity for what they can rescue. If you think about the size of the one in Yarmouth, it's probably the length of this row of seats in front of me. Yet its capacity to rescue is 250 people. Right? So it's the right type of boat to go and rescue these, unfortunately, large, inflatable, very insecure boats. You're quite right that, we see television coverage which suggests that, they aren't sinking, that they're just, in some problem or other. But again, we don't deviate from that. If you're in trouble, don't care what the trouble is, you don't have to be drowning, you just have to be in trouble, then the RNLI will do their best to actually go and save you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Part of the answer you just gave covered something I wanted to ask, which was how you liaise with other people and how the decision is made about which assets to be deployed in any given situation. The other side of that is cooperation, not only within the RNLI, between people on beaches and people using boats, but also with other organisations that may be involved, some of them quite volunteers and amateurs, but nevertheless you have to have a liaison with them. How does all that work? How does this, when we listen to our radio on a boat in the Solent, we hear that there's an emergency. What's the decision-making process going on and how do you solve that?
Okay, well, let me take you through that very quickly because it's really, really straightforward and it happens this way all of the time. If it's a radio call, a VHF radio call on Channel 16, it will be picked up by Solent Coast Guard. It will be responded by Solent Coast Guard. Solent Coast Guard will then determine where that problem lies. Where is the boat, for example, that's made the call? Where's the person who's gone overboard and has called because they're bobbing around in the Solent but have called it on their either mobile phone or their VHF? And they will determine what resource they need to actually task to be able to do that. So it's the Coast Guard's decision that says, we'll launch a big lifeboat, or we'll launch a small lifeboat, or we'll launch multiple lifeboats. So we get our instructions from the Coast Guard. What happens when we get the instructions is our pagers go off. And as you may have known, you've got lifeboat crew members living in the vicinity. As soon as the pagers go off, what happens locally here in Lymington is as many people from the operational crew as can make it will descend upon the station. Once they're there, then the decision is made by the senior staff within the station as to what is the nature of the call. Is it a fire? Is it an injury? Is it a sinking? Is it a breakdown, etc.? And they will organise the makeup of the crew according to what the task is. And it's then the decision of the lifeboat operations manager and his assistants, called deputy launch authorities, to decide whether the conditions out there are safe enough to launch our crew. That's the decision to go. What happens then is all of these rescues will be well coordinated by the Coast Guard, so if it's an injury or something like that, there will be a call to an ambulance, there will be an ambulance waiting when we get the casualty back in again, etc. So at an operational level, it works very, very well together. Now, I'm going to give you a slightly different answer as well, which is what's unfortunately been affected a little by COVID, but is now starting to come back, is the forward planning process. So there's something, we're just literally about to have a meeting in a week or so's time of something called the Southampton Water Safety Forum, which includes the RNLI, includes Hampshire Fire and Rescue, includes Hampshire Police Unit, includes Southampton Council, includes Hampshire County Council, it includes the Marine Volunteer Service, etc., etc. So we're very much part of that sort of conglomerate, if you like, of safety-aware organisations that are actually trying to plan for how do we cope with these things. I hope that gives you an answer.
Is another couple more questions?
you haven't mentioned the NCI. What is the
I apologise. Yes, you're absolutely right. I should have mentioned the NCI. They are part of the team as well.
Yes. Also, I'm wondering what the relationship is between NCI, the Coast Guard. Often you think the Coast Guard operative is stuck in a screen in an office somewhere and not looking at the sea, and the RNLI.
Yeah. Have we got any members of the Coast Guard in the audience? No. Good. Then I can give you a proper reply. The problem to some extent with the Coast Guard is a turnover of staff. So you're quite right. The Coast Guard station, the local Coast Guard station in Lymington, does not apply here for a minute, but the normal Channel 16 rescue process has a bunch of people sitting in Fareham looking at computer screens or answering the phones there. Unfortunately, with a high turnover of staff, quite a few of those are still in training, etc. And it's a frustration to many yachtsmen that when you give them a position that says, I'm 2.5 miles southeast of the Needles, they will say, yes, but what's your Latin long? Well, I've just told you I'm 2.5 miles southeast of the Needles. No, but what's your Latin long? Because they won't actually understand, if you like, what we might understand as the way we do things. The NCI, however, as you correctly say, their eyes on the water. And so I have a high regard for the NCI. One message I would get to everybody, if you're a boat owner and using it, is don't call for radio checks on Channel 16. Call the NCI on 65. They're delighted to do that for you, and ask them for a weather report at the same time. They'll give you that too. So you're absolutely right. I apologise to the NCI. I missed them off the list, but they definitely are there.
David, hi.
National Coast Watch Institution. Yep.
David, hi. You mentioned that you had 1,500 lifeguards over 250 beaches, and with the explosion of paddleboarding at the grass level routes of infant schools upwards, what initiatives are you educating the children in the schools?
Well, thank you very much for the question. You happen to have hit exactly the right topic, because we were sitting only a month ago now, 13th of September, organising the Youth Education Initiative for 2025. And that's going to be a significant drive to get to talk to lots and lots of school-aged children. To put that in context, there are nearly 400 schools in Hampshire, and we need to get people to actually talk to groups within all of those 400 schools. So there's a significant ramp up of water safety volunteers, youth education specialist volunteers, in order to try and meet that need. These are the people who actually are starting to go paddleboarding, are starting to take up kayaking and things like that. So we want to catch them before they even get anywhere near the water, ideally, and inculcate some safety messages for them. So we know it's a big challenge, but it is actually one we're already working on.
Thank you. Shall we take
This gentleman here, I think, had a follow-up.
Well, I was only interested in recent years, the funding from the government, the Coast Guards, was cut significantly.
Yep.
The way it was organised was changed. It felt to us as sailors that it had become much more remote.
Yep.
Does it work as well now as it did before? I know there are technology changes, but do you feel okay with all of that, or do you think it's a bit thin?
No, I think the Coast Guards do a fantastic job, given the resources they have. We'd love them to have more resources. It does actually raise one question that lots of people ask us, which is, why does the RNLI need all this money? It's because we get no government funding at all. Why do we have no government funding? Because we don't want it. Because they can actually then take it away from us again, which is exactly the thing you're describing. So it's a bit more in our control.
Okay. Shall we take two more questions in here?
I've got a question, but before that, I would like to just publicly thank the RNLI for all they did last weekend for Lymington Afloat. We had a lot of volunteers on the pontoons, making sure that nobody fell in, and if they did, they would be rescued very quickly. We had the Yarmouth lifeboat, the all-weather lifeboat came over, fascinating, and people came back and said, I'd never imagined how many people it could hold. Yep. Our local lifeboat, of course, did launches on Saturday and Sunday, much enjoyed, and they did rescue the poor lady who fell off her paddleboard twice, I think, on both days. And I'm glad to say that the seawater bars raised well over £2,000 for the RNLI. So it was a big thank you from everybody for all that the RNLI did for us. And of course, everyone here who goes out to sea is enormously grateful. I have a question, though. That was just a thank you, which is, as you think about the planning in the future and all the different requirements, the big boats, fast boats, the inflatable boats, the shore one, where's the money going now? I mean, what's the sort of plan as the RNLI looks ahead? Where's it putting more resource?
Well, again, let me explain the process for a minute, because it's not arbitrary. Every 2 or 3 years, we get involved in a detailed coastal review. And what that means is we conduct a survey of all the incidents, all the shouts, all the locations, all the outcomes, and then try and assess whether the outcome would have been better if we'd had a different type of facility within range of that particular incident. That's what determines what type of boat we have where. So it's been going on for years in the RNLI. We do this really, really intensively. The RNLI is a huge data machine at pool. I mean, it's got masses and masses of this data. And we try to make our decisions based upon the facts. So very straightforwardly, if it came up that, for example, Yarmouth's big lifeboat was no longer necessary because we didn't need to go very far because people weren't sailing so far, then over time, the instance of that would probably get Yarmouth replaced by an inshore lifeboat. The reverse is also true. If we suddenly found that for whatever reason, the Solent is crammed with loads and loads of people falling off paddleboards and getting into all sorts of problems, and we need bigger lifeboats, then something might arrive in the way of a bigger lifeboat as far as Lymington is concerned. So it is very much judging what the facility is that we need to put in place, where do we need to put it. I hope that answers your question. If I could follow on for a minute with a personal comment, unfortunately, I was away for this weekend. My team were here. I think Charlie and the team were there. I was in France, but I'm glad it went so well, because I know they were all looking forward to acting as marshals and seeing what an event it was. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question at the back, and then I think we'll have to wind it up.
Thank you very much. Sort of question for the future, really. One of the problems that we're facing at the moment in defence is trying to work out what technologies we need to be looking at, since we've got a problem with having to move away from dense energy through petrochemicals.
Yep.
So what is the future area that you might be looking at sort of 10, 15 years from now in capability development? Is it about autonomy? Is it about different energy sources? What is the future of the RNLI going to look like, and is there anything we can do to help, sort of thing?
Well, I think two very quick comments there. One is there is a pretty intensive research project going on inside the RNLI over the use of drones. Can we actually use drones to basically extend our reach, extend our capability, extend our surveillance for rescue? So there's undoubtedly going to be some mirroring, if you like, of activities there in the defence area. The second thing I think is interesting one. We've already made the move in the sense that the Shannon class, the latest big fast lifeboats, are water jet driven rather than props. So we can drive them up beaches and do this sort of stuff with them, so they'll have a much, much longer life in service life. But they are also already looking at the question of, can we go electric? Unfortunately, I don't think the ability for the sorts of activity that we have at the moment is there in terms of electric traction for boats, but undoubtedly we will keep on top of that very closely, and if the powers that be decide this is something we should try it.
Thank you very much for answering all those questions.
That's all right.
Really interesting answers. Would everybody like to join me in thanking Mr. Monks very well?
Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you.